Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the new Leader of the House for the forthcoming business?
The Leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, it's a bit early, on Monday the 2nd of September, the House will not be sitting. On Tuesday the 3rd of September, proceedings in committee and remaining stages of the Census, Return Particulars and Removal of Penalties Bill, Lords. Wednesday the 4th of September, remaining stages of the Animal Welfare Sentencing Bill. Thursday the 5th of September, debate on a motion on the future UK Shared Prosperity Fund, followed by debate on a motion on the British house building industry leasehold. And those subjects for those debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee. On Friday the 6th of September, the House will not be sitting.
Valerie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Leader of the House for the forthcoming business. This isn't exactly an energised list. I thought we all had to be energised for the future, but maybe we'll look forward to a further energised list. But I want to start by paying my thanks to the Right Honourable Member for Central Devon for engaging in such a supportive way in the House. He really wanted to know how the House worked, and congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Northamptonshire South in her new role, and a former Leader of the House, the Right Honourable Member for Aylesbury, who stood down from the front bench post after 20 years. Mr. Speaker, he started as a special advisor to Douglas Hurd. I hope we see the like of those people again in the party opposite. I too want to pay tribute to Paul Evans, who's been absolutely fantastic. He has had a distinguished career in the House. He's been very supportive when I've asked him questions, and he has been really assiduous in the kind of work that he's done and the committees. If anyone cares to look at his Who's Who entry, they'll see that his recreations are the British Constitution, walking, silence and empty places, among other things. Paul, how have you survived 38 years in the House of Commons? But it's interesting that he likes British Constitution. I don't know why he's retiring. We need him more than ever now. Can I welcome the Leader, and it's great to see him in that place, and perhaps suggest to him a few things. He does have staff, so the nanny can stand down. And I know his previous job was to send googlies and a full toss to the government, but actually he has to try and get the business through. And I want to ask him if he could, along with the Honourable Member for Perth and North Perthshire, could he get a complimentary copy of Erskine May for us? We shouldn't really have to buy it. I know it's online, but it would be really helpful if the main opposition parties had a copy of it. And the way this happens is the deal is that I ask about business and the Leader's supposed to respond. We usually get 2 weeks. I wonder if we could go back to that discipline of 2 weeks. But I have a few questions for him. What's going on for conference recess? Whether proroguing is still on the menu? Could he rule that out? We know that the Prime Minister gave a mini manifesto on the streets of Downing Street. When will we have a new session of Parliament? This has been the longest. And the previous Leader had said that we'd used up our allotted days for Opposition Day. Could we have some unallotted days? Mr. Speaker, what a mandate, what a ringing endorsement. Less than 0.4% of an electorate, 46.8 million citizens, can vote in the general election. But the Prime Minister was selected by 92,000 people. 92,000 people taking back control. He has not won the support of our country. I know that the Prime Minister talked about the awesome foursome. The awesome foursome. But what about the gruesome twosome? I know the Leader respects Parliament, but given that the Special Advisor to the Prime Minister refused to obey an order of this House and is actually in contempt of Parliament, could the Leader please say whether the Special Advisor can come to the box and come to the floor of the House while he is in contempt of Parliament, and will he get a pass? Perhaps we need Counsel's advice on this. I know the Leader respects Parliament, there was a message sent from the Lords about a joint select committee. Could he look into this? I know his predecessor, as we finished business questions, was on the way to the Lords. It's not difficult to set up a joint select committee. There isn't much work in the first week back. We know that the select committee for exiting the European Union has already produced a report on the effects of business under no deal. It can't be difficult to set up the select committee and to take the evidence that already exists and produce a report. But, Mr. Speaker, whilst the Tory party has been appointing their new Prime Minister, unprecedentedly, there has been 70 written statements. That is absolutely outrageous over 3 days. Important ones like the School Teachers Review Body. What does it say in that, Mr. Speaker? Yes, teachers can get a pay rise, but the government is only going to use 0.4% to support them. The rest has to come from their own budget, 2% from their own budget. This really is a tale of two Britons. And the Philip Auger Review, the Prime Minister said she wanted to see that implemented. That written statement says tuition fees should be reduced from $9,250 to $7,000. Yet the written statement says that the maximum tuition fee will remain at $9,250 for the 2021 academic year. Some parents can afford to pay the tuition fees up front. This really is a tale of two Britons. And the same day, the Secretary of State for Transport revealed that the cost of Crossrail has escalated. Now, as a keen parliamentarian, could he ensure through the usual channels that some of those written statements are actually debated on the floor of the House? I mean, we can make an agreement and perhaps we can have a debate, given that the business is so light for the first week back. Now, he will know, I hope, that I have made a pledge that I will raise the case of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe every week until she is free. Yeah. Richard Radcliffe said that Nazanin returned to prison, and he said it was like proper torture. Could he raise with the Prime Minister, and can the Prime Minister make amends by meeting with Richard Radcliffe as soon as possible and make that important phone call to the Iranian government? A 5-year-old girl is growing up not knowing what it feels like to hug and kiss her parents. He will know, as a father of 6, how important that is. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you to you and your staff and the Deputy Speakers for their unfailing courtesy and help to me, the Leader of the House currently and all his staff, the clerks, Phil and his team of doorkeepers, the House of Commons Library, the official reporters, the catering, cleaning staff, postal workers, security, and of course our Opposition Chief Whip and his staff, and welcome the new Chief Whip, who's actually shown me personally some kindness, and I thank him for that. But, Mr. Speaker, all sorts is going on in the Whip's office. The Honourable Member for Ogmore's got married, Davina's got married, Millie has moved to the Department of Education. We welcomed Keir William Sullivan on Monday the 22nd, and good wishes to Simon and his wife. And finally, thanks to Sam Clark, who's been in the opposition and in the government usual channels department for 6 years. He's going to Restoration and Renewal, another big thing for the leader, and I hope he'll enjoy lots of Mars bars. That's a private joke, actually. And obviously, thanks to everyone in my office and to each and every one of honourable members. I know how hard this has been. I hope you all have a restful and peaceful summer recess.
Leader of the House, Mr. Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Shadow Leader for her incisive list of questions, and indeed for the suggestion that I should replace nanny with the staff in the Leader's office. I think they might be a bit bemused if 6 children trotted in with me and expected to be looked after by House of Commons staff, so I won't go down that route. The issue with Erskine May, it is available online for free. Now, I understand that opposition members view themselves as modern and cutting edge and thrusting, and that therefore going online may not be too problematic for them. Even I can do it occasionally myself. And if they don't want to do that, well, the Erskine May proper edition is available for £400 and may prove a good investment. The issue, The issue about the business that's being announced, it's being announced for a week. That has been standard practice for some time. I know that historically it wasn't. But, Mr. Speaker, you said yourself that convention had to evolve, and this is one of those conventions that has evolved. And now we merely have it for 1 week. The Honourable Lady also asked about the conference recess. The Honourable Lady knows that recesses are a matter for this House to determine, and no doubt through the usual channels a proposal will be made, though I do imagine that it will be convenient for members to be able to attend their own party conferences. That has been what has happened previously, and it tends to be to everybody's benefit. And I'm glad to see, I see the Chief Whip for the Labour Party nodding, or at least appearing to nod at that. And so I think that there may be something forthcoming in due course. The issue of prorogation is absolutely marvellous, because the Honourable Lady asked for a new session and said when would this session end, and then asked me to promise we wouldn't prorogue. Well, we can't have both, because we can't get to a new session without proroguing. Though my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has said he views prorogation as an archaic mechanism and does not wish to see archaic mechanisms used, as I am bound... As I am now bound by collective responsibility, that is now also my view. In regards to the Lord's message in relation to joint committee, that's obviously going to be looked into. We always wish to treat the other place with respect. I think that is an important way that we operate, and that will be taken care of in due course. And on the written ministerial statements, I mean, this really is your... I was going to use a word beginning with D and ending in M, with an ED on the end if you do, and the same if you don't. But Mr. Speaker might rule me out if I do say that, which I don't want to do on my first appearance at this dispatch box. That Parliament wants to know what's going on, and there is limited time for debates. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week gave me an urgent question on Batten disease. We know that the system for getting statements and urgent questions answered works, and therefore, if there are issues that people wish to raise from the 70 written ministerial statements, there are mechanisms which the Honourable Lady is extremely well aware of. As to her very important point on Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe, absolutely, I will take that up, and I promise that I will take that up every week for her. We as a nation should always put the interests of our citizens first. It is fundamental to how this country should operate in its conduct with foreign nations, and the treatment that she has had to undergo is shameful and must be so distressing. And when she talks about Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe's child, a 5-year-old, being deprived of a mother, that is the most awful thing that one can imagine. And so I have the greatest sympathy, and yes, of course, I'll take this up. May I conclude by reiterating the thanks that the Honourable Lady gave to everybody in this House, and how lucky I am now to be leader of this House. What a privilege it is, what a fine House we have. I've always found that everyone wants to know what's going on in this House. The doorkeepers know first and provide us with a fabulous service. In paying tribute to Paul Evans as he retires, well, I think all sensible people have the British Constitution as one of their hobbies. It is the most interesting matter to discuss and be informed about. It's why £400 for Erskine May is such a good investment, because it educates one about the British Constitution, and I wish him well in his retirement. And finally, I pay tribute to my predecessor, my right honourable friend, the member for Central Devon, who was such a distinguished leader of the House and Lord President of the Council.
There are, of course, Greek antecedents of the word archaic, a concept and fact with which the leader himself will be closely familiar. However, I think I can say without fear of contradiction and for the avoidance of doubt that the word archaic, as spelt now, originated in the 19th century and in France. So, by the standards of the Leader of the House, it is distressingly modern, and it is also, and I simply say this as a matter of fact, of foreign origin. But he will have his own views about that matter and others. Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, may I first of all start by welcoming my right honourable friend to his post. I think he will bring modulated and very moderate tones to these debates. But one thing is for certain, Mr. Speaker, is that this place, in business questions, will now be an absolute must to have a seat. So I welcome him in that regard. Can I, however, raise with him, nothing can be done in this session, but I have a particular issue, which is that I am a co-sponsor of a bill to change the existence of the process of modern-day slavery with Lord McColl. And I ask and urge him to press upon his colleagues at the Home Office, who have to date been utterly mealy-mouthed about the changes that are necessary to make those victims of modern-day slavery, give them the opportunity to come forward rather than fearing arrest and incarceration. Would he please press his colleagues in the Home Office to make it an urgent matter that those provisions in that bill are actually brought forward as soon as possible to improve the quality of the lives of those who suffer most?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I rise, my right honourable friend, the member for South Northamptonshire, has arrived to sit next to me, a very distinguished predecessor of mine, who I congratulate on her promotion and return from the back benches. On modern-day slavery, my right honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think it would be opportune to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, the former Prime Minister, for all the work that she did in relation to modern-day slavery and the terrible curse that it is and the hidden curse that it is. And I share his view that everything should be done to stop it, and the Home Office should move in that direction, and people should not fear criminal prosecution if they have been held as modern-day slaves. That clearly would be desperately unfair.
Pete Wishart.
Mr. Speaker, and can I join you in your warm tributes to Paul Evans and wish him all the best in his retirement? And can I thank our curious new Leader of the House for announcing, well, the meaningless stuff which we're coming back to in September. And can I obviously warmly welcome him to his place. He's the fifth Leader of the House that I've had in my 4th year, but it would have to be said that he's by far the most exotic so far. And maybe... And I did not mean to upset the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire in that particular remark. But maybe it would be as well to point out to him he's Leader of the House of Commons, not the House of Plantagenet or the House of Tudor. And he will have, of course, a number of key responsibilities. Prime amongst them is restoration and renewal, perhaps not a concept that he is particularly renowned, unless, of course, it's one of his own houses when it comes to that. And can I join everybody in paying tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Central Devon? We'll now never get that holiday bus from hell, Mr. Speaker, and I will forever miss his terrible jokes about music at my expense. And even though he knew that his post would probably only be temporary, he did take his job in his stride. And I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but I went to bed last night and I had this horrible nightmare that the UK government had been taken over by rabid right-wing Brexiteers, and I'm not particularly sure whether I'm awake yet. So can we have a debate about dystopian visions of hell and have a look at where this cabinet of dysfunctional Bash Street kid fits in? And I'm presuming that at some point the Leader of the House will be wanting some sort of debate about Brexit when we get back, given that's been his life and mission. He and his ERG colleagues are now the political mainstream in this House. So when we get the chance to debate their big plans to crash out without a deal and all the disastrous consequences that awaits for us. And I know he's familiar with Scotland. He famously fought the Glenrothes by-election with his nanny and his roller. So he knows that no way on earth is Scotland going down with his colleagues and his buffoons Brexit. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, can I wish you, all the staff in this House, a very happy recess. Can I wish the Chairman Leader of the House and the new Leader of the House a very warm time, and hope they enjoy themselves and have some time for relaxation. It's hot outside, Mr. Speaker, but as they continue to open the doors of hell in their buffoons Brexit, it's going to get a lot hotter yet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I may be the 5th Leader of the House since the Honourable Gentleman has taken his post, but from what I hear, it seems that his question is the same regardless, so it doesn't make any difference who the Leader of the House should be, and therefore I fear the answer is going to be much the same. Now, I would point out that the House of Commons predates the House of Tudor. It started in 1265. House of Tudor obviously begins with Henry VII. honourable gentleman is a very good parliamentary historian, but 1265 is when the burgesses come from the towns, as he knows perfectly well. Anyway, on restoration and renewal, I had the privilege of serving on the Restoration and Renewal Committee, and I think it is extraordinarily important that this House of Commons is not only a beacon for democracy, as it was built to be in the 19th century, but also as a functioning modern Parliament. And finally, the honourable gentleman will be very reassured to know that he doesn't have to wait long. Thursday, the 5th of September, we will be back here and we will have questions to the Department for exiting the European Union. So his wish is my command. It will be granted.
Justine Greening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to welcome my honourable friend to this role, which I think he is very well suited to. He is obviously a student of the British Constitution, so can we have a debate on the importance of parliamentary democracy and governments respecting the will of parliamentary votes on all matters, including the wish of this House not to leave the European Union with no deal?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for her question, and my right honourable friend is very well aware of how to obtain debates in this place through the Backbench Business Committee and adjournment debates. Mr. Speaker was kind enough to give me an adjournment debate only last week, and is wonderfully accommodating, if I may pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to you in ensuring that the House gets to discuss what it wants to discuss, and I think that is important. But with relation to leaving the European Union, this Parliament voted for the Withdrawal Act. It said we would leave. Its predecessor Parliament, which has an enormous commonality with this House, voted by an overwhelming majority for the Article 50 Act that also said we would leave. These two acts combined provided that we would leave under UK law on the 31st of October 2019. Parliament debated, Parliament decided, parliamentary democracy requires we deliver.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and can I welcome the Leader of the House to his new role. Mr. Speaker, I actually thought I was getting somewhere with his predecessor, his immediate predecessor, on the issue of parliamentary time becoming available should the government business run short, and could the Backbench Business Committee be considered. If that may be a potential outcome, that the Backbench Business Committee could backfill that business so that the House isn't rising early and that members can have issues that they want vented on the floor of the House. I really do hope we can work together on that. And Mr. Speaker, I could also echo the tributes to Paul Evans. We actually share the bus in the morning quite often, so I do know him quite well, and he has helped us on the Backbench Business Committee. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, can I wish you, everyone on all sides of the House and all staff of the House, in particular the staff and the members of the Backbench Business Committee, a very happy and healthy recess. I think the members of the Backbench Business Committee have done a great service to this House in recent months, keeping the business of this House ticking over on many, many days.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman for the fine work he does as chairman of the Backbench Business Committee. I may have received a generous promotion from the Prime Minister, but I haven't gone native. I do believe that the government should be held to account, and particularly by backbenchers, and that the issues that they want to debate ought to be debated, and the Backbench Business Committee ensures that happens. As to the question of short business, I completely understand the point the honourable gentleman makes. The only point I would raise is that there is a concern if business is not known in advance, so that people can't prepare their speeches and their remarks, but that I'm very happy to work with him to see if there is a solution to this.
Sir David Amis.
Congratulate my right honourable friend on his appointment, thank his predecessor for today's summer adjournment debate, pay tribute to the retiring Sergeant-at-Arms, the Speaker's chaplain and the retiring clerk. But would my right honourable friend find time for a debate today on benefits paid to people without sight? Mrs Jill Allen King has appointed an anomaly whereby people born before the 8th of April 1948 who were on the standard rate of the disability living allowance are now not entitled to the lower rate of the attendance allowance when they retire.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he reminds me to pay tribute too to the retiring Sergeant-at-Arms, who is a very distinguished figure. He's also absolutely right to raise the matter that he does. Blind and severely visually impaired people clearly face significant challenges in living independent lives. Up until April 2011, Disability Living Allowance, DLA, failed to reflect those challenges. The government has put in place changes to rectify this, and I would encourage my honourable friend to seek an adjournment debate so he can raise this particular concern directly with the appropriate minister, but I will also pass on his concern after today's proceedings.
Tom Break.
Speaker, could I really welcome the Leader of the House to his position, because certainly the Liberal Democrats, we couldn't want for a better recruiting sergeant for us than him, as we set up a contest between Victorian values and Liberal Democrat values. But more seriously, could I ask the Leader of the House if he will make time available for the House to discuss his views on Northern Ireland and the checks on the Irish border as we had during the Troubles, as he has articulated, and how the government could keep an eye on the border and an ability to have people inspected, and the impact that this would have on the Good Friday Agreement.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I may be a better recruiting sergeant for the Lib Dems than the honourable gentleman is, but that... I fear that may not be a very difficult task. With regard to Northern Ireland and the border with the Republic of Ireland, the Prime Minister has made clear that there will not be a border imposed by the British government, but he is another fortunate man that there will be Northern Ireland questions on the 11th of September, and he can raise these matters directly with the relevant minister.
Rachel McLean.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I also warmly welcome the new Leader of the House, and I was delighted when his honourable friend, the Prime Minister, made social care a priority from the steps of Downing Street. Can I ask him, does he back this, and will he use his efforts to bring forward this important legislation which affects so many carers and dementia sufferers up down the country?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful for that question, because before I was bound by collective responsibility, I wrote the foreword to a paper encouraging the government to do exactly what the Prime Minister was suggesting yesterday. So before I was bound to say things that I'm now not allowed to say, I was saying broadly what she would like me to say, if that isn't unduly complex. But there will be an adjournment debate on social care on the 4th of September.
Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place following last night's brutal events in Downing Street. He will know more than most on that side of the House that the Leader of the House's job is to be the voice of Parliament in the Cabinet rather than just the voice of the Cabinet in this place. And at a time when we are in a very volatile situation with issues of the threatened prorogation of this place as a tactic to drive us out of the EU without a deal, when he and I both know that there is no majority for that in this House, will he give me a pledge that he will take his duties to this House seriously and warn the new Prime Minister that that way will cause chaos?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady's question, and the Honourable Lady was herself a very distinguished shadow leader of the House, and somebody I have the greatest admiration for in her appreciation for the Commons as an institution. I can absolutely assure her that I take that part of my role extraordinarily seriously. I have perhaps a somewhat romantic view of the House of Commons, I think one I share with you, Mr. Speaker, about how it is our job to hold the government to account, not simply to facilitate whatever the government wants to do. However, this House passed into law the Withdrawal Act and the Article 50 Act, and we only speak our view by legislation. We do not speak our view by mere motion, and mere motion cannot and must not overturn statute law, because if that were to happen, we would not have a proper functioning representative democracy. We would have an erratic, changeable and irregular system of government.
Sir Edward Lee.
What a pleasure to welcome my right honourable friend to the dispatch box, a fellow ultramontane Catholic. I'm not sure many people here know what that means, but my right honourable friend knows, perhaps luckily. He has a firm grasp of history. Perhaps some would say he is living history. Does he agree with me that so much of the work we do here depends on us being here in the Palace of Westminster? I don't want to pin him down because I don't want him to rule anything out or anything in at this very early stage. But is he aware that many of us believe that if we do have to leave this palace, it should be for as short a time as possible? When we return, it should be exactly as it is now, and our priority should be the safety of the building. And also we should care about heritage, particularly the heritage of Richmond House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share my right honourable friend's admiration for the late Pope Pius IX. But in terms of this house and what it represents and the symbolism of this building, what our Victorian predecessors did was to show through their architecture their belief in their democratic system and their confidence in our great nation. We should never do anything that undermines that. And the idea that we should go and be in some modern office block in the middle of nowhere, or that we should fail to have the understanding and the glory of our democracy that this House, through its building, shows, is one that I would utterly reject.
Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the right honourable gentleman to his new job, and we'll watch his performance with great interest. But does he agree with me, and can we rely on him to be a champion for justice for everyone, regardless of their background or their wealth or their connection? And does he realise that on the 10th of January 2018, Caitlin Dawson was killed and two other women very badly injured when a white BMW crashed into the queue she was going to school. Crashed in, killed her. She was 15, an only child. Could we have an early debate on what is going on in the Crown Prosecution Service? There has been all these months, and now the Crown Prosecution Service has decided not to bring any charge against Mr. Richard Brooke, the driver, because he got off on the CPS thinks he was going to argue insane automatism, which is increasingly being used by rich and wealthy, well-connected people to get off when they kill people.
Mr. Speaker, this is an issue of the greatest importance, and these terrible events move anybody who hears about them. That the death of a 15-year-old through a criminal act is invariably tragic. I absolutely believe that one of the founding principles of our nation is that justice is blind and there is equal justice for everybody, and that is something that all members of Parliament should commit to. As regards a debate, the honourable gentleman, the chairman of the Backbench Business Committee, will have heard his appeal, and is one I'm sure many other members of the House may want to support.
Steve Baker.
Speaker, it's an absolute joy to see my eminently right honourable friend in his proper place at the dispatch box, and of course I congratulate him. I know he'll want to join me in congratulating our right honourable friend for Loughborough on her return to government. Can he give the House any indication of when we can look forward to what I'm sure will be the eagerly awaited anticipation of the election of the new chair of the Treasury Select Committee?
Mr. Speaker, that is a very, very important question. It is one where I threw my hat into the ring last time. It was thrown back at me very firmly, but it is really important that our select committees have chairmen in place. It is a matter that will be dealt with in the normal way, but I would hope that it would be dealt with urgently.
Ruth Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This week, lots of children broke for the summer holidays, and for many that is a joy and a pleasure. But for many parents, they will now have to pay for an extra 10 meals per week per child that were provided through free school meals. 20% of parents will go without a meal this week to do so. The government's invested in a pilot scheme. Can we have a statement the first week back of how the pilots ran?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady is indeed right. This year, around 50,000 disadvantaged children in 11 local authority areas will be offered free meals and activities over the summer holidays, funded by £9 million from the Department for Education, which follows a successful scheme last year of £2 million. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows that there are means of obtaining statements or urgent questions to see that there is an answer, and no doubt you will reflect upon it if such a request is made.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I welcome the new Leader of the House. He will know his role, as has been said already, is to represent Parliament to government and say things that Parliament wants said and not necessarily what government wants to hear. We've had an extraordinarily long session, Mr. Speaker. We need to end the session. We need to have a new Queen's speech. We need to have new opposition days. And we need, importantly, to have private members' days. Will the Leader of the House consider arranging a Queen's speech, say in November?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend may want to raise that question with the Prime Minister, who is making a statement later, and who is the person who will advise Her Majesty on when the next session of Parliament should begin. But obviously there will have to be a new Queen's speech at some point, and I believe this is the longest Parliament since the long Parliament of the 1640s.
Stephanie Peacock.
Speaker, my constituent Jackie Wildman was killed by a stolen lorry. The 4 men responsible had 100 convictions between them, yet will only serve between 5 and 7 years. Now it is nearly 2 years since the government committed to raising the maximum sentence for death by dangerous driving. So can I ask that this new administration make this a priority, and can I ask the new Leader of the House when exactly he will make parliamentary time available?
Well said, Steph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These cases are absolutely terrible. I think I mentioned earlier an application to the Backbench Business Committee for this matter, and that the two members are coming together in feeling that such a debate is necessary and is important. And I feel that that is absolutely the right way to go, and I just have every sympathy for families in this terrible, terrible situation who feel the law is not helping them.
Simon Clark.
Mr. Speaker, and in welcoming my honourable friend to his place, may I say how welcome it is for this House to have a ministry committed to leaving the European Union in all circumstances. To that point, can we get a debate on preparedness for all outcomes, including a no-deal Brexit?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for his question. I share his view that it's jolly good news that we've got an administration that is committed to leaving the European Union, which is exactly what the British people voted for in 2016, and indeed what Parliament legislated for. And preparedness is of great importance. I think he may find there are some encouraging words from the Prime Minister coming a little later, so that may preempt an immediate debate.
Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 14 weeks today, we are due to leave the European Union. But with 5 weeks of recess and 3 weeks of anticipated conference recess, that is more time away from this place than actually here. Now, the new Leader of the House told us before that he believes in our parliamentary democracy. What plans does he have to recall Parliament so he can deal with the greatest issue to face our nation since the Second World War?
Mr. Speaker, any cursory visitor to the Chamber over the last few years would have heard hours of debate in this place on leaving the European Union. If they had troubled to wander to the other place, they would have heard even longer hours of debate of leaving the European Union. This is the most discussed subject Parliament has managed in decades, and Parliament came to a decision when it legislated. And I'm sorry to repeat the answer, but I will have to carry on doing so. Parliament voted for the Article 50 Act and the Withdrawal Act. That set by law the timetable for leaving. That is the democratic decision of Parliament.
Sir John Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the self-appointed shop steward of the regular attenders at Business Questions Club, can I welcome our many guests, and in particular, welcome the Leader of the House, of whom I've always been inordinately fond, not least because I know that not everyone enjoys the benefit I do of a working-class upbringing. The Leader The Leader will know that taxi and private hire vehicle licensing has been a matter of profound concern, so much so that an enlightened former Transport Minister commissioned a report on that subject, which was published in September last year, the government response being published in February this year. We've heard nothing since. It is vitally important that we reform taxi and private hire vehicle licensing, so that the concerns of those that drive taxis can be taken into account and the welfare and well-being of those who travel in them can be protected.
Well said, John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wasn't it Disraeli who said that the London taxi was the gondola of London? And I share that view. I think we are very lucky to have the taxi drivers that we have, though I think that the shop steward of these sessions will find that the new Secretary of State for Transport, self-elected, well, aren't most shop stewards self-elected? I thought that's how those things worked. That my right honourable friend will be able to raise this with the new Secretary of State for Transport.
Tracy Brabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With more people self-employed than on minimum wage, and by 2020 more self-employed than in the public sector, any government worth their salt, and a government who says they are the party for the people and working people, would know that putting self-employed at the front of their agenda is absolutely vital. So could we have a debate in government time that discusses workers' rights for self-employed, particularly when it comes to maternity and paternity rights?
The great thing to remember, Mr. Speaker, is that the self-employed are the entrepreneurs of the future. They are the ones who create the new businesses and create the new jobs. It is a fantastically dynamic part of our economy. But the Honourable Lady's question is very well timed, because I am sitting next to the new Secretary of State responsible, who will have heard her plea and will no doubt take it into consideration.
Mr. Robert Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my honourable friend on this wonderful new role. My honourable friend, as well as liking the British Constitution, I know that he likes cutting taxes. So can we have a debate on axing the reading tax? But it's incredibly unfair that people who buy books or magazines online have to pay 20% more than those who don't.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is an absolute genius at getting debates in this place. He hardly needs advice from me. He's already got an adjournment debate coming on the 4th of September, which I expect will be even better attended than this morning's session is. So I feel that I'm inadequate to advise him on how to achieve more debates, but his subject is indeed a worthy one, and I hope that his plea will have been widely heard.
Kate Green.
The Leader of the House is known for his courtesy, so I'm sure he will agree with me that language describing travellers as an invasion, a disease, contrasting them with decent people, or talking of them as a problem, all of which have been heard in this House in recent months, is deplorable. Will he arrange a debate, perhaps in Hate Crime Week after the recess, for us to discuss how we can use language respectfully towards everybody in this country?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for her generous compliment. But it really is important that we use language properly, that language is effective and language is powerful. Mr. Speaker controls how it is used in this House to ensure that it is orderly. But the general tone should be one of generosity and kindliness, and I would always encourage that. In terms of a debate, I don't think one in government time is likely, but as I've said before, there are adjournment debates, backbench business debates, Westminster Hall debates, and it is a really important issue, and I would encourage and share the Honourable Lady's view that good manners goes a long way.
Andrew Selous.
I warmly congratulate my right honourable friend on his new appointment and say he's already looking like an old pro in the position. Could we have an urgent debate on serious deficiencies in the enforcement of minimum wage legislation? A carer in my constituency is owed £63,000 in unpaid minimum wage, despite the Care Act requiring Luton Borough Council to have an effective monitoring process of the personal budget payments involved. HMRC, as the enforcement agency, can take no action against the person cared for because she has no assets. How can my constituent get her unpaid minimum wage?
Mr. Speaker, that is a very serious issue. Regrettably, I can't comment on individual cases, but I'm clear that care workers provide essential support to some of the most vulnerable members of society, and it is essential that they are paid in accordance with the law, including the national minimum wage, for the work that they do. This is a responsibility of local authorities, who should ensure that personal budgets are sufficient to deliver a person's care needs, including making sure that it covers the cost of wages, and they have a duty to monitor how personal budgets are spent. But the Department of Health and Social Care will take this up with the local authority and ask them to investigate what sounds a very serious and concerning case.
Order. I'm keen to move on to the statement by the Prime Minister at or very close to 11:30, so the normal practice of accommodating everybody will not apply today. However, participation will be maximised by short questions and the Leader's characteristically pithy replies. Single-sentence inquiries are to be preferred. Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations on the new job to the Leader of the House. He said already today that he will be the voice of this chamber and that he will hold the government to account. Can he therefore tell us, what does he feel about the appointment from the new Prime Minister of somebody who's his closest advisor who has been found in contempt of this House? What will he do to hold them to account for that decision, and what does he feel about it?
Mr. Speaker, Parliament did what it did. It passed its sentence. It didn't use its ancient powers to imprison or fine the gentleman concerned. It didn't send him to the clock tower. Therefore, effectively, his conviction is spent, and I believe in the rehabilitation of offenders.
Bob Seeley.
Speaker, I welcome the right honourable gentleman to his new role. Ministers made a holding statement on the telecom supply chain review this week. Huawei and Chinese high-tech was not part of that, or no announcement was made. Due to the seriousness of this issue, will he consider a debate in government time so that government outlines options on the role of Chinese high-tech in our critical national infrastructure? Apart from Brexit, this is one of the most serious issues that we will face in the 21st century, and would you agree we need more debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's obviously an important issue, but the means of obtaining a debate are well known. I did express views on this before I was bound by collective responsibility, but currently I'm waiting for the government's review.
Jim Cunningham.
Mr. Speaker, coming back to the honourable gentleman's question on taxi regulations, the Leader of the House never answered the question. When is he going to bring those proposals? The Minister responsible going to bring those proposals to the House? Because the Minister told us it was only a matter of parliamentary time. Will he find the time?
Well, the honourable gentleman knows that there are usual channels for finding time, and that ministers ask for time for things to come forward, and that these things have to slot in with the overall parliamentary timetable. But the commitment has been made, and the commitment will be honoured.
Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I also welcome my right honourable friend to his new role. I know his predecessor was looking at the online harassment that sometimes politicians face, especially women and those from certain ethnic groups, and was planning to engage with counterparts from other parliaments across the world to see how they had addressed this issue in order to stop putting people off standing for Parliament. Can I urge him to continue with this important work?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for raising that important issue. It is something that should distress us all, that online harassment seems to affect a certain category of society more than others. It seems to affect women and ethnic minorities more than men. And it would be absolutely appalling if this deterred good people from coming into political life. I'm extremely keen that the suggestion she made be looked at, and that we try and work out how to lessen this problem, because it's something we should all be worried about.
Chris Leslie.
If the new Leader of the House will say a little more now about how he intends to champion the supremacy of the House of Commons, because we've slipped into some very bad habits recently: Opposition Day motions not being fulfilled by the government, other resolutions being ignored by the executive. Does he believe that if this House of Commons resolves something, that he will ensure those resolutions are faithfully executed?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman has a view of history that is longer than mine. He says recently. I don't think 1972 is that recent, but it was then that this House abrogated parliamentary sovereignty and decided to hand it over to what then became the European Union. I'm glad to say we've taken back control and that Parliament will be sovereign once again, but Parliament is sovereign by law, not by mere motion. The last time it was sovereign by mere motion was when it issued ordinances under Oliver Cromwell. Do I wish to go back to that, Mr. Speaker? No, sir.
Henry Smith.
Mr. Speaker, and I warmly congratulate my honourable friend on his appointment. I also very much welcomed yesterday on the steps of Downing Street the new Prime Minister talking about investment in primary care. In Crawley, too many GP surgeries are at or over capacity. Can we have an early statement on that issue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his kind words. He's absolutely right to raise this issue. We all know that GP practices provide a vital service to our local communities. We will continue to build on the recent changes to GP services and primary care, as set out earlier this year in the NHS long-term plan, including an extra £4.5 billion for primary care and community services and up to 20,000 additional staff working in general practice over the next 20 years. And I'm sure the Health Secretary will report back, which I hope will meet his demand for a debate.
Newlands.
Mr. Speaker, as we've heard, the leader is supposed to be the great defender of Parliament and parliamentary democracy, but in January he said that if the House of Commons undermines our basic constitutional convention, then the executive is entitled to use other vestigial constitutional means to stop it, by which I basically mean prorogation. So is the leader going to be Parliament's man in Cabinet or Cabinet's man in Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, you and I know perfectly well that this constitution of ours, this precious vessel of our constitution, is bound by conventions, and it is overwhelmingly important that all the conventions are followed and obeyed. These are conventions about how this House operates, how the other place operates, and how the executive operates. These are grown up over time from our history and our understanding of how we should be governed, and it is very risky to break one convention, because that then leads to other conventions being taken less seriously.
Marcus Jones.
I welcome my honourable friend to his new position. Private building inspectors are a vital part of the construction industry. Through no fault of their own, many of these building inspectors are now having a massive issue in terms of renewing professional indemnity insurance. Can the government provide a statement confirming what it can do to support the reform of this important insurance?
I'm well aware of the issue. It is an important one, and I will pass it on to the relevant minister.
Jenny Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The powers to stop and search young people is viewed useful in reducing serious youth violence. Will the new leader of the House agree to a debate on this in government time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If only people would bait their breath momentarily. The new Prime Minister is going to make a statement shortly, and one of the things he has already been advocating is ensuring police have our support for stop and search. So there may be an opportunity to ask my right honourable friend in a moment.
Julian Knight.
Speaker, as we break for some restoration and renewal during recess, my constituents' lives are being blighted by two things. First of all, inconsiderate garden grabbing with no social purpose whatsoever, and the second, stealing of car parts to order. Can we have a debate, please, in government time on these twin menaces and how we reform the law to help my constituents?
Thank you. I think it's very important that we always stand up for and help our constituents. But the chairman of the Backbench Business Committee is still sitting here paying close attention to what is being said, and I'm sure his committee will consider my honourable friend's request.
Colleen Fletcher.
Mr. Speaker, I recently met with matrons at my local hospital in Coventry. We talked about a range of issues, including the government's disastrous decision to abolish NHS bursaries, which they said had resulted in a 32% drop in applications to study nursing, thereby exacerbating the workforce crisis in our NHS, where we already have 41,000 nursing vacancies. Will the Leader of the House look for time to debate the problem of recruitment and retention in our nursing profession and the need to introduce the NHS bursary to help address...
Mr. Speaker, the relevant Secretary of State has whispered in my ear, and I feel it should have a wider audience, that we have record numbers of nurses and record numbers in training. So this is a significant success of this government, and if we wish to have a debate on the successes and triumphs of this government, I would be all in favour.
Chris Green.
Mr. Speaker, would my honourable friend provide government time for a debate on the future of the Northern Powerhouse? Because we need to deliver on the vision, unite the talents across the North, defeat the poverty of Labour's low aspiration. So will my honourable friend reinsert the all-important energy to the Northern Powerhouse.
This is an absolutely brilliant point, Mr. Speaker, and follows on from what I was saying. I think we should have days of debate of the wonderful successes of this government. £13 billion spent on the Northern Powerhouse, the Minister for the Northern Powerhouse now attending the Cabinet, triumph after triumph achieved by this government, and we've only had our new Prime Minister for 24 hours. It's absolutely amazing. But it's probably in the purview of the Backbench Business Committee.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I also congratulate the new Leader of the House, who appears to be very well fitted to the role. Can I ask the Leader of the House that I'm very disappointed that in the first week back we do not have business with regards to a draft historical bill on abuse for Northern Ireland. Will that be on the second week when we're back, as indicated by the Northern Ireland Secretary?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, really, should be aware that there will be Northern Ireland questions on the 11th. He can raise this with the relevant minister, but I accept it's a really important issue.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Could we have a debate on the importance of a commitment from both the UK and the EU to the continuation of allowing musicians and artists to work without hindrance in each other's territories?
Mr. Speaker, this is obviously of importance that we want to be able to ensure that cultural exchanges continue, and I'm sure that this will be something that will be achieved by the government.
Helen Goodman.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate the Leader of the House, with whom I've spent many happy hours in the Procedure Committee, where he championed the rights of this House. He perambulated around the question about prorogation. So, to be absolutely specific, can he confirm that the House will be sitting each week, every week, between the 8th of October and the 31st?
Mr. Speaker, we've got perambulators and nannies into this session, which I think must be a first for Leader of the House's questions. The issue of prorogation is one that my right honourable friend has said is an archaic usage, but there will have to be a prorogation before there is a new session. This is the routine constitutional position, and I believe in maintaining the constitutional conventions.
One sentence. Bob Blackman.
Transport for London are currently consulting on building high-density multi-storey housing on car parks at stations across London. Can we have a debate in government time on the impact on commuters right across the whole of South East England?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I understand that my honourable friend is likely to be called in the adjournment debate later. It will be a golden opportunity to raise this subject.
Cat Smith.
Speaker, I do hope that recent kipper waving isn't a red herring. And can I ask the Leader of the House when we can expect to see the Fisheries Bill back?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear a word.
Let's hear it again. Cat Smith.
I do hope that recent kipper waving has not been a red herring. And can I ask when we can expect to see the Fisheries Bill back in this place?
Thank you very much. Those kippers, I can assure the honourable lady, were absolutely delicious. They were eaten by my right honourable friend with gusto, and shows his characteristic support for the British fishing industry. But the honourable lady knows that bills come back through the normal channels, through the normal courses, and all things will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well.
Gusto eating is a challenge to even the most vivid imagination, but we will reflect upon that, I feel sure. Steve Double.
Earlier this week, a group of local authorities representing rural areas formed a coalition under the title Britain's Leading Edge. Many of these areas have benefited from European funding. Once we leave the EU, will the government continue its commitment to invest in these areas through the Shared Prosperity Fund?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is, of course, our money in the first place, which is recycled. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has whispered in my SPF, so yes, the money is there.
Snell.
When will the House have a chance to vote on their Lordship's amendment to the Trade Bill for participation in a customs union?
Why on earth would anybody want to do that?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place. Will he join me in congratulating the team at Sainsbury's in Kinross for getting the Perth and Kinross Gold Stars for Equality at Work? And will he provide some government time to discuss the Disability, Confident and Access to Work programmes?
Well, I I extend my warmest good wishes to the Sainsbury's in Kinross for their brilliant achievement. I think it might be a slightly niche subject for debate on the chamber floor of the House of Commons, however.
Diana Johnson.
With antisocial behaviour and crime rising steeply since 2010, and in the first half of July, 23 emergency service workers were assaulted in Hull. I was very pleased to hear that the Prime Minister announced last night 20,000 new police officers. Can we have a debate on when those police officers are actually going to be on the streets, where they're going to be in the country, and whether they will be equally shared around?
Mr. Speaker, may I wish the Honourable Lady a very many happy returns of the day. I understand it is an auspicious day today. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is going to be making a statement. He has clearly made the extra 20,000 police an absolute priority. We need to ensure that everything is done to combat crime and to ensure that people in Hull and everywhere else in the country are safe. But it may be sensible to ask my right honourable friend later.
Order. We must now move on, but in thanking the